Hey everyone, welcome to Reflections, the wisdom of Edgar Cayce. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are coming to you courtesy of our broadcasting partner at The More Show. This week on the show, I'm honored to welcome Tom Baker. Tom is a psychotherapist in private practice based out of Virginia Beach. Tom grew up with the Edgar Cayce readings and went on to become a Catholic priest, serving in parish work, seminary teaching, and administration. He resigned from the priesthood after 10 years of service and later received his master's degree in social work in 1994. Tom has studied and taught A Course in Miracles for 33 years, as well as the Cayce material. And Tom is a regular presenter for the Association for Research and Enlightenment's field conferences across the country. And Tom's next program is entitled Awakening the Spiritual Master Within, Soul Growth Secrets from the Edgar Cayce Readings and A Course in Miracles. And this event is set for November 5th, and it'll be in the Detroit, Michigan area. And if you'd like to learn more about that, you can visit our website at edgarcayce.org and click on Events. Tom, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today on Reflections, the wisdom of Edgar Cayce.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Excellent. And Tom, I want to start off with maybe a little bit of our background information for our listeners and viewers who aren't familiar with your work. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how your personal journey has brought you to be a teacher of the Cayce material and A Course in Miracles?
Well, yes, I got in touch with the with the Cayce material when I was about 8 years old. My grandmother married a man whose mother had been cured by Edgar Cayce. And the Cayce material came into our home, and my mother especially. My father was an atheist, so he wasn't very interested. But my mother was very interested in reincarnation. And I was going through a kind of crisis at the time about life and death. A little girl in my class had died, and she was my partner on the playground, and we used to talk. And so she was really the first person that I had ever known who had died, and it was a real shock to me. And when I asked adults about why Elizabeth had died, they said that, pretty much God needed another angel in heaven. And then I became very worried that God would want me as an angel in heaven. And I got to be very afraid of dying and very afraid of what the afterlife would be, if it would be anything at all. God started to seem to me very arbitrary, although I wouldn't have called it that at the time. That he just sort of took chances with people, and we took chances with God. So that the discovery of reincarnation through Edgar Cayce was an extremely important piece of wisdom in my young life. And I became the first kid in my neighborhood who believed in reincarnation. And I quickly found that no one else wanted to talk about it very much. So I sort of kept it to myself and studied Edgar Cayce as much as I could find throughout my adolescence. It was a sort of secret religion for me. And the whole deal of Edgar Cayce and the cures and everything he did really convinced me that his material, especially the cures he'd done, his material was right on in everything he said. So I had my own little Edgar Cayce religion as I was a teenager.
Wonderful. And of course, now you've been a Course in Miracles teacher for, I want to say, at least 33 years now at this point. And I'm curious, Tom, for our viewers who may not, I'm sure a lot of our viewers are very familiar with the Cayce material, but some of them may not be familiar with the Course in Miracles. So can you give us a little background in A Course in Miracles and how that manifested in your life?
Yes. I discovered the Course in Miracles at the A.R.E. I was at a conference there for the Course in Miracles, and there were speakers and everything. And one of the speakers was Dr. Jerry Jampolsky, who was saying how important it was to be like a child and to be innocent and to not judge. And I was a priest at the time, and a Catholic priest, and I thought that his material was interesting, but very non-applicable. It wasn't practical. It was way too transcendent, too up in the clouds. And I decided after the morning session that I was going to leave. I was going to spend the time on the beach during the week and maybe pop in on some sessions, but generally to just to kind of avoid it. And as I was walking out, one of the volunteers there said that they needed a sharing group leader. And they thought since I was a priest, I could work with groups. And I said, well, I'm not that interested. And then she said, well, we'll give you $50. And I said, oh, all right, I'll do it. So I said, I'm a Catholic priest, and I'm going to tell you about Jesus and Edgar Cayce and all that. And they said, well, that's good because we're Jews, and the Course in Miracles comes through a Jewish person. But it's about Jesus, and we don't really like Jesus. He's not one of our star people. So that week, I kind of shared Edgar Cayce with them, and they shared Course in Miracles with me. And by the end of the week, and I bought all the volumes that I could, and I drove back to Louisville and set up Course in Miracles courses in both my parishes. So I started it early and started it with anybody who would come, and finally we had a group of about 25 who studied the Course in Miracles.
And Tom, what similarities have you found over the years being both a student and teacher of A Course in Miracles and the Cayce material? What similarities, but also what differences have you found amongst those two sources of wisdom knowledge?
Well, again, they're kind of apples and oranges in some ways. They share the same goal, which is to face the false self, or what the Course in Miracles will call the ego, and to get in touch with the spiritual self, or the real self, which the Course in Miracles would call the Holy Spirit. So they're both after the same thing. Cayce kind of comes from earth to heaven, in that he speaks in terms of what people need, what people want, especially in physical healing. Questions about the past with Atlantis and Lemuria, and the material that is most like the Course in Miracles is the Search for God study groups. It's that material that is a lot like the Course in Miracles, in that you are developing certain virtues, certain ways to think that help you to achieve and to realize the real self, or the spiritual self. To a great degree, Cayce points to what we need, and points to what we need to work through and work beyond. And the Course in Miracles sort of goes into how that's done. The Course is a course in thought change, how to change your thinking so that your perspective is looking through the eyes of love rather than the eyes of fear. So it makes a big dichotomy between love and fear, and how fear is connected to anger, and anger is connected to judgment, and how to look through those things and past those things so that you become a teacher of God, which means that you have a consciousness that is based on love rather than on fear.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Tom. And Tom, I want to talk a little bit more about your 10 years of experience as a Catholic priest. It's well known amongst Cayce followers that Cayce was a devout Christian himself, and he often struggled in this regard, as some of the things that were coming through in the readings caused internal conflict with his personal beliefs. And I guess in saying this, Tom, how has your experience been personally integrated and also helped shape who you are today as a teacher and practitioner of holistic health practices?
Well, I've believed in reincarnation ever since I was 8 years old. So I've believed in reincarnation a long time and have integrated into my worldview and my life view and my view of death and all those things. It's helped me immensely. When I was a priest, I once gave a sermon on ghosts, and I said that I believed in ghosts, and I believed even that in spirits, and that I did not disregard or discount the idea of reincarnation. I didn't say I fully believed in it, but I said that I was open to it. And after that, a lot of people came to see me and talked about believing in reincarnation. I was sort of a safe person to talk to. So I carried that through my ministry, mainly to say that death was not something to be afraid of. Death was not the end. There was not a hell that was waiting for people. And this was very popular, or I became very popular in this idea, because so many Catholics were afraid of dying and afraid of going to hell. So that's one way I worked Edgar Cayce into that. I also changed my diet and encouraged other people to change their diet that would match Edgar Cayce's recommendations. So that was mainly the two ways I did that. And as today I'm a psychotherapist, and I also do past life regressions. So sometimes when a person has a kind of thought or fear which really hangs on, or they've had it all their life, a past life regression can help in that a lot. So I do that, and then just generally work with my Course in Miracles material in helping people get beyond their fears, knowing that they can't lose their life and they can't lose their worth, and to take people to a place where they're not condemning and they're not blaming. Well, one of the things that Cayce said a lot was that your life will be so much simpler if you can forgive. And the Course in Miracles centers itself on forgiveness and how to do it, what it is, how it works in your life, what it does for you, all those kinds of things. So it's kind of like Cayce points to what needs to be done, and the Course in Miracles delves into how it can be done.
Absolutely. And Tom, you're quoted as stating, you had mentioned earlier that you're in a psychotherapy practice based out of Virginia Beach there, and you're quoted as stating that your therapy is based on your conviction that the keys to mental health and wholeness are already within the individual, which I think is such an empowering philosophy to have when it comes to health practices. How do you explain this, though, to a client who shows up to your office looking to you for all the answers for the problems they face?
Well, I suggest that the answers are within them. I can give some answers. I can give a kind of background or basis which they can begin to see that they do have the answers to a lot of their own questions, and sort of take them onto a different paradigm that they're used to. Many people kind of come to get some information, where I would lead them more towards an experience of God, the experience of spirit and love and forgiveness, especially forgiveness, to be more the answer to their question than their question. People often come to me with a question, who's at fault? Is my mother or my father the result of my depression? Or are they causing my depression? Is my husband or wife, are they the reason that I'm unhappy? Whose fault is it? And if it's my fault, what can I do to repent, or what can I do to resolve this on my own? And I try to get them out of that mindset of it's somebody's fault. So this is often the approach I take.
Wonderful. And Tom, you speak often of living gracefully or being full of grace in referring to life. Can you better define this for our viewers? What exactly living gracefully means to you? And also, if maybe you can give us a little insight into how does one better achieve this state of grace as we go through the kind of ups and downs of life?
Well, I think to be in the state of grace or to live gracefully is to put God first, to put God at the center of things. God is usually put on the periphery of things, and when all is lost, pray to God. I would say when all begins, pray with God, and have God pray with you. Enter into a constant sort of background conversation with God, so that God is the only strength which you trust in. As you begin to rely on God and rely on His power, then a lot of things turn out right. Things start to come together. And that's living gracefully, living in the midst of grace. It just depends on what you're depending on. And so much of the time we depend on ourselves and we depend on our fears to protect us. So we have a kind of vicious circle going in which we're afraid and we want fearful answers, or we want something that will just stop things instead of reflecting on things. So God is the center, and then God is that which really we're longing for. God helps us feel good, and we're longing for God. And as you practice forgiveness and acceptance is really what forgiveness is in A Course in Miracles and in Edgar Cayce. It's not just somebody did something wrong to you. You're forgiving the way they are. You're forgiving things that are not your idea, or not your idea of how things should have turned out. So there's an extreme emphasis on acceptance, and that's pretty much what living by grace is. God is my power, and grace is the result. Well, people start relaxing. They and they start to see things in positive terms rather than negative terms, and they start seeing each other in terms of love rather than condemnation, in terms of judgment. So the groups that I've had, the groups sort of get happier and happier. People, are no longer grinding away at a grudge or a grievance or something they've been mad at for a long time. We pretty much start overcoming that. And people just start to be very calm, very open, open-minded, open-hearted. And that's what I find very rewarding. That I find it rewarding to be in the group where people are treating me with open-mindedness and open-heartedness. So yeah, it's not just an intellectual exercise. There's intellect to it, but it's very much a kind of heart-opening exercise. The Course in Miracles and Edgar Cayce. I think Cayce people are very open to other people. They're open to new ideas. And they're open to the experience of life rather than kind of waiting to die. They want to live vigorously. And that's the difference. But in the Course in Miracles, there's just a lot of happiness. There's a lot of joy. And I've always been amazed at the transformational value that the Course in Miracles has.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And Tom, in your work over the years, you speak often of the human ego. Um, you use the acronym EDGE God out for human ego, and this is to represent
Yes.
the kind of the functions of this elusive aspect of what it means to be human. And in saying that,
Mhm.
Tom, what can you tell our listeners about the human ego, and how can it lead us away from God?
Well, the ego seemed, according to the Course in Miracles, the ego developed, or seems to have developed, because of our seeming separation from God. Um, Cayce describes the sons of God and the sons of man coming to earth, and having to sort those out. And it was sort of like the sons of man forgot about God and got enmeshed in matter and enmeshed in fantasy. And this was what started to cause the separation, or the seeming separation, between ourselves and God. And this idea that we could be separate from God, which the Course in Miracles calls a tiny mad idea, that whole idea that separation could be real, started to develop into the ego. And the ego is just the idea that God is gone and that God hates us. So that you have a great fear of God. You see that in a lot of religions, a terrible fear of God. But there's also within all of us a terrible longing for God, a kind of deep, deep sense that we experience often as loneliness, that there's really the experience of God that we want back. But the ego tells us that we should be afraid of that. Now, the ego is not a being. It's more of a little tight thought system that sees God as the enemy, and love is the enemy. And so instead of loving, we do things involving power. We try to overcome one another. We try to be special. I try to be more special than you. You try to be more special than me. So we're in a great competition in life to be more special than each other instead of simply loving each other. You see it in marriage where people say, or I say to people, for instance, do you want to love or do you want to be right? Most people say they want to be right and they want to love, but you can't do those things together necessarily. So you need to allow yourself to be wrong and to be humble, and that God can eventually overcome the ego. The ego conditions the human mind to be judgmental, but mainly it conditions it to be afraid. So it's afraid of loss of all kinds, the loss of life, the loss of worth, the loss of reputation, and we build a lot of our life around our fears. There's a whole system of psychology called the Enneagram, which says that personality is built around 9 different fears. And this is well in line with what the Course in Miracles teaches, that that fear becomes our kind of God. It becomes our anchor, and then we build a personality and a life around what will save us from our fears. For instance, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and I fear failure. So I try to rehearse things and make things go okay. And I finally learned at 66 years old that you can't always do that, and that to just go with the flow and make everything okay and just pick up where we left off, just like this. So the Course is reconditioning the mind it's pointing the mind towards love rather than fear. And love, of course, means that there's abundance. There's always enough. Wherever Jesus went, there was enough to eat. There was always a cure for illness. There was enough food. There were enough friends. There's enough wisdom. There was enough love. So that's where the Course in Miracles is taking us, so that there's a central belief not only that fear cannot hurt you, nor can it separate you from God, but that you will always have enough, and that God is enough for you.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And I guess talking in this theme of fear and ego, you've been known to mention talking about this kind of Disney movie idea, and I really love this idea. It's one I've heard of before, and it's an idea that's so prominent in our culture today. And often it's can you kind of elaborate on what it means, this kind of idea of a Disney movie worldview on life, so that our viewers can better understand how this may be playing out in their own lives, and of course the lives of our children as well.
Yes, well, it's not a popular idea that I've got, or that other people have had. The idea is that Disney, the whole point of your life is that your dreams come true. And if your dreams don't come true, then your life isn't worth much. And the whole point in A Course in Miracles, and to some extent in Edgar Cayce, is that we're lost in a dream. So that your dreams coming true just keep you they keep you lost. They just keep you sort of immediately satisfied, and that if oftentimes dreams don't come true, and often when they don't come true is where you face yourself. Where you say, well, maybe I don't know what I want, or maybe I don't know what's best for me. Maybe I don't know what everything means and what it needs to mean. So I'm all for Walt Disney sort of not succeeding. It's important for dreams to come true sometimes, but at other times you're just avoiding yourself, and you're avoiding what isn't yourself.
Absolutely. So it kind of creates this false expectations often that can leave us with a lot of despair and just disappointment when it comes to the true realities that we're facing in life. And as you said too, those moments where things don't meet our expectations, there's kind of a nugget of incredible wisdom to be gained from that moment when we do have to face ourselves and move through it.
Exactly. Yes, and this often shows up in marriage. Whereas someone has a dream of the person they marry, and then the person doesn't fulfill the dream. The dream of marriage doesn't come true, and they're faced with having to love the person that's there rather than the person that they made up in their dream life or in their imagination. So I've seen it lead to quite a bit of trouble, especially when people are married or in very close relationships. And the task is more to love the person rather than to love the dream. And Disney and a lot of stories, especially stories where your dreams come true, have made that the basis of people's lives. And as you say, it can be extremely disillusioning and disheartening when the dream turns out not to be so.
Right. And Tom, in one of your brief mentionings of one of your talks that you did, you mentioned some of your what you call your modern saints. And I loved your list because it was eclectic. It wasn't a very traditional list, which I think is something that's really special about your style of teaching. And it's a testament to the amount of knowledge that you've been able to intake over the years and the things that have influenced you. So your list included, I want to share with our viewers, Gandhi, Eckhart Tolle, Ram Dass, Bruce Shelton, and then you ended the list with your wife. And Tom, I'm curious, what is it about these souls in particular that gives them their saint-like qualities to you?
Well, mainly there were people who did not give into the status quo of revenge. Mr. Rogers is also on the list, or Fred Rogers. They're people who accept the world in its potential, rather than in what's wrong with it. My wife has always accepted me for more or less my best qualities. She takes the best and throws out the worst. And I think that's what my spiritual heroes do. Gandhi not only freed India, but he also helped Indians believe in themselves, and to believe in themselves as Indians. Let's see, who else? Edgar Cayce. He has grabbed on to spiritual experience, and then not given in to the ego experience. He says there really is a better way to think, and there's a better way to relate to people, rather than what the ego is doing. So he's not trying to blend the truth and what's false. He's really trying to lead with the truth, and all those heroes of mine do that.
Absolutely. And I think in listing off those heroes of yours, Tom, it's clear that you find an importance in studying both Eastern and Western thought, and Eastern and Western schools of philosophy. I know also in some of your talks you've been known to refer to Jesus as the greatest bodhisattva of all time, which is a true blending of East and West just in that one statement there. So what I want to ask, Tom, is how important has it been for you to pursue those different schools of thought and incorporate them into your personal practice every day?
Well, it's been important. I meditate every day, and I pray. Meditation comes mainly from the East, and prayer comes from the West. It's the East, especially Hinduism and Buddhism, are trying to advance consciousness, whereas the West is trying to advance right action. So one is the East is a reflective form of consciousness, whereas the West is an active form of consciousness. So it's kind of like in the East it teaches you to love the poor, but in the West, in Christianity and Judaism and Islam, it teaches you to feed the poor, not just to love them, not just to say, well, they're my brother or sister. It really asks you to do something for them and help them live a better life. So, but I think you have to start with the East. I think you have to start with raising consciousness, rather than bypass that and just do good deeds and think not so good things about the people. So I think that the Course in Miracles is very much a blend of the East and the West, and in that it's there to raise your consciousness, but it's there to help people and especially to forgive people. I think that's the gift of Christianity really is forgiveness. And the gift of the East is consciousness raising and metaphysics. Cayce's metaphysics are all Hindu metaphysics. That's something that really mixed up Edgar Cayce himself, because that's one thing he didn't understand, chakras and things like that. Okay, well, what I was really saying is I read Hindu things and I read Buddhist things, and I read Christian things. So I try to keep myself informed from both an Eastern standpoint and a Western standpoint. The Eastern standpoint is more higher consciousness, whereas the Western standpoint is more higher action.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I couldn't agree more. And Tom, another thing I really like about the way you present information is that you often share moments in your personal journey in which you had a very personal experience that helped you to grow spiritually. One story you shared in particular is you talked about how your knee-jerk reaction to judge has been brought to light in some various situations you found yourself in. And in saying this, I think this is such a thing that other people deal with, trying not to judge, but also that quick knee-jerk judgment that we so often make when we find ourselves in an uncomfortable situation. So in saying that, Tom, what advice would you give someone who's trying not to judge the circumstances that they find themselves in and struggling not to judge the lives of those people around them, judge the journey of everyone else?
Well, that's a hard thing to do. I would first of all tell the person that they're safe. That they're safe with that person that is attacking them, perhaps, or dismissing them, or not paying attention to them. They're still safe with that person. The person can't take away their dignity. That person can't take away their life or their ability to love. They may take away their opportunity temporarily to love and to live the way they want. But they can't take it. They can't take it forever. So you're safe. You really are safe. That's the first thing. The second thing, this is a leap, but the person actually, whoever it is, does love you, and you love them. The earth is almost like a stage in which we take parts, and at least that's what I believe. And in the part that you're both playing, you may be at odds with one another. I remember Mahatma Gandhi, when he took over the presidency of India, said to the English ambassador, he said, let us not, let's see, how did he put it? Let not what we do today interfere with each other being brothers. And I thought that was beautiful. That he says, you know, we still love each other. There's love there beneath our conflict. So although people say, well, how can I ever love them? But were you to know them in different circumstances, you might very well love them. You might love them very easily if they weren't playing the part they were playing and you're playing the part you're playing. And then the third thing is to really step back and see if there's an approach that could address their fear that would help. You know, it might be letting them know that you understand something about them. I know in my own practice, so often people who are very, very angry, they've lost something, and they've lost something very dear to them. And if you can get to the loss, then you can often get to a conversation. But you have to do that. So there's a sense if you can speak to the fear of a person, and then with that third step, then you're often in pretty good stead with them.
Wonderful, sound advice. Thank you. And Tom, kind of as a final question here, at the A.R.E. in Virginia Beach, you are known to do a weekly study group on Sundays dealing with A Course in Miracles and teaching that material and diving into those workbooks. I also wanted to mention here that you are presenting a program for the A.R.E., and this is going to be near Detroit, Michigan, and it's on November 5th, and this one's entitled Awakening the Spiritual Master Within, Soul Growth Secrets from the Edgar Cayce Readings and A Course in Miracles. So obviously you will be blending all of the knowledge you've gathered from those two sources. But I'm curious for our viewers who may be listening in that area or planning to travel, can you share a bit about what your participants can expect from this presentation and also what you hope personally they take home from it and apply to their own lives?
Okay. Yeah, they can expect a very entertaining program. And I mean entertaining. I tell stories and give examples, sometimes even tell jokes, so that there's a lighthearted feel to what I'm conveying. So they'll be interested. It will center on understanding fear, where fear comes from, and what the separate feeling from God is like. Stories about love, and sometimes stories about the scientific world and the world of love, and how the two are together. But it's basically how the transcendent love is something we have forgotten, but not abandoned. We still want it, we still believe in it, and we recognize the experiential sense when we see it or when we experience it. That's why I tell a lot of stories, because the stories convey the experience of love or fear very much more than just telling about it. I'll go into the problem of loneliness and how loneliness is really loneliness for God's love, and talk about the false self or the ego self and the true self or the spiritual self, and how Cayce talked about that, coming here to face the false self, and how the Course in Miracles talks about facing the ego, and the importance and presence of living in the now, something Edgar Cayce emphasizes enormously, and to have some exercise in which we live in the now, just to get that as experience. So essentially, it'll be about love, it'll be about the ego, and it'll be about forgiveness.
Wonderful. I'll look forward to that, Tom. We'll make sure that we give our viewers the links to register for that if they'd like to. And as a final question, Tom, I want to ask you, for those who are just now coming to the Cayce material, this may even be their first introduction to it as a viewer of the show, or they had never heard of the Course in Miracles before, and now they're hoping to go out and pursue that as well. What suggestions do you give those who are just being introduced to these materials as far as the beginner step?
Well, my first advice is to take it slow, not to jump in and try to know everything all at once, but to let a new perspective kind of grow on them, help kind of go gradually. For instance, if you go to church, don't stop going to church. If you don't go to church, then don't just jump into some church. Just kind of see the way it is, and what Cayce is emphasizing, and what the Course in Miracles is emphasizing. Those who are going for the Course in Miracles for the first time, if they want to study it, I would say start with the workbook rather than with the text, and kind of take the first 20 lessons, not quite as absolute as they sound, but take them a little bit with a grain of salt, and to say that what they're trying to do is they're trying to let you know that you don't have to know everything. In fact, you can know nothing, and it's all right. So that's the second thing I would say, is not only take it slow, but try to have a beginner's mind about it. Try to have a fresh look, a sense of being a child again, and being retaught how to see the world and yourself.
Wonderful. Very sound advice. Thank you, Tom. Well, Tom, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your incredible wisdom that comes from, as we can tell, so many different sources. And I thank you so much for being a part of the A.R.E. family and teaching A Course in Miracles and showing people how the Cayce material and the Course in Miracles can help to enrich each other, just like all schools of thought. So thank you, Tom, for being on the show. Appreciate you giving us your time today.
You're welcome. It was a joy.
Wonderful. Take care, Tom. Thank you.
You too. Thank you, Brent. Bye-bye.
If you're in the Virginia Beach area, Tom facilitates, as we talked about, a weekly course in Miracles study group, and this is at the A.R.E. headquarters, as I mentioned, in Virginia Beach, and this takes place on Sundays, every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m. To learn more about Tom Baker, you can visit his website, and that's tombakeromega.com. On behalf of everyone here at the Moore Show and, of course, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, I want to thank you so much for tuning in to our program. I encourage everyone to check out our website at edgarcayce.org if you'd like to learn more about the Cayce material and how you can personally get involved with a community of like-minded people. I wish you a wonderful week, and again, thank you so much for tuning into our program. Much love. And now it's time for the thought for the day today here on Reflections, the Wisdom of Edgar Cayce. And joining me to indulge in a thought for the day today from the Cayce readings is Dr. Bill Austin. Bill, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you, Brent. It's always great to be here. Thank you so much for asking me.
Absolutely. And if you can go ahead and read the excerpt that we chose from the Cayce readings for today, and go ahead and give me your thoughts on it.
I'd be happy to. This thought comes from reading 470-22. For within the human body, living, not dead, living human forces, we find every element, every gas, every mineral, every influence that is outside the organism itself. For indeed, it is one with the whole. For it is not only a portion of and equal to and able to overcome and meet every influence within, but there is not the ability in the third dimensional force or influence to even imagine anything that isn't a part of the activity of a physical living organism. What a statement. You know, he's saying we've got it all. We've got all the goods inside of us. I've reflected on this reading many times over the years, that when we take a look at the outside world, there's nothing out there that doesn't resemble what's happening inside of us. For many years, I taught anatomy and physiology. I absolutely loved it because these correlations would just blossom all again and again. Our nervous system and the computer, incredible correlation between the two. We have a nervous system that is so vastly complex and initiates so much function within the body. And we have computers that operate much like our nervous system. I used to do this example where I'd have my computer up and running and I'd be looking at it and say, oh, gee, nice computer. I like the shape of it, like the color of it. It's pretty good. Doesn't do much, though. And I'd wait for my students to catch on, and give me some feedback. And finally, someone would say, well, Doc, you got to do something to it. You've got to put some input into it. And then it'll happen. And the student's right. You got to hit a key, and magic happens. Our nervous system works the same way. Its reaction is based on the input that we put into it, whether that input comes from one of our senses like touch or a thought. It will initiate action within the body. And in another Cayce reading, Cayce talks about there is nothing that man or anyone on this plane could not be healed from. We've got all of the goods inside of us, and if we happen to be lacking, we can go to nature and get whatever the, I'll say, chemical component is that we need to initiate function, to jumpstart our system. Our system is a chemoelectrical mass of energy. And sometimes we need to supply the electrical energy to it. Sometimes we need to supply the chemical energy to it. And most of the time, we're just stimulating what's already there. I like to think that the body knows how to be healthy, knows how to heal itself. It wants to heal itself. It wants to be healthy. And we have to have the right attitude and sometimes give it the right impulse to jumpstart it, to get it going in that direction. I find the study of physiology and anatomy, but we've got most of the parts labeled at this point. But physiology, how this body functions, is absolutely intriguing. And sometimes I'll be pondering a Cayce reading or thought process on a disease like psoriasis. And I challenge myself to figure out the physiology of what he was talking about and why it might work. And it's amazing how things fall into place when you start thinking along the lines that he's talking about. The physiology is there, and all of the components that we need for healing are there. We might be stuck, or we might have a subluxation in the spine that's interfering with the nervous system. In fact, years ago when I was a hospital corpsman in the Navy, this was back in 1974, someone gave me the book, There Is a River. And it was in that book that I read about the concept of adjusting the spine to coordinate the nervous system to promote healing within the body. And boy, that is so powerful. Now sometimes, when you adjust the spine, you're resetting the electrical component, the nervous system. But sometimes they need particular chemicals, or the body needs particular chemicals, so that it can work with the electrical input. So I'm finding when I read, readings like this that says, we've got it all. We do. How do we turn it on? If we happen to be lacking a little bit on the inside, we can go to nature and we can get the right component. Many times he offered herbal remedies. Sometimes he told people to eat dirt, because within the dirt there were elements, there were minerals that the body needed to have. And it wasn't dirt from someplace else. It was usually dirt in their environment. It was right there. It's just fascinating. I love to ponder and go through these medical readings.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell. That's wonderful, Bill. And I couldn't agree more. The more, as you know, the more you study the human body, and especially the immune system or the nervous system, and really anything, it's awe-inspiring. It's jaw-dropping to find out the complexity. And you do realize, as you said, you made that analogy with the computer. You realize that there's really no better technology, no better supercomputer than the human body.
Yeah.
It's coordinated effort of the trillions of cells in your body that's constantly going on and constantly adjusting and acting according to the environment is unbelievable. We're simply building technologies that are just trying to keep up with what we already have within our human
Yes.
body. Yeah, absolutely. And I love this reading for so many reasons. One thing that comes to mind for me is that it's basically saying in this that we only exist as we do and enjoy the pleasure and pains of human life because of a constant coordinated effort of these elements that Cayce talks about, the elements, the gases, the minerals, the organs that are within our body, and everything else literally working overtime within the confines of our body just to keep us alive and well on our journey. And I find so often this is something that I will forget and I'll take for granted. And the moments when I sit down and really ponder how incredible the human body is, or I read an article or some research or a book on that really explains how truly amazing it is. It's, if you want to find a higher power, if you want to find a connection to God, and you're of more of the scientific mind, that might be a good path that I would recommend for somebody to take, is study the human body, study physiology and anatomy and the biochemical components that are constantly going on inside your body. And it's truly awe-inspiring. And another thing I just wanted to touch on real quick with this is this idea of this incredible coordinated effort that's always going on inside our body is an essential idea that I think we miss when it comes to how this could be applied to our social, economic, and political structures. It could literally revolutionize our future and finally put an end to this idea of kind of separatism this idea that we don't need to be working together. It's this separatism that really divides and pits people and organizations against each other, and it's really just perpetuating an illusion that's based on a misunderstanding of the principles that are going on, that are taking place inside our body. The principles, you think of traditional Christian or Hermetic principles, where you think of as above, so below, or as within, so without. And to remember that and to start applying it to how our society functions, and rather than
Mm.
looking at kind of that model of everything is separate and everything has its own little separate compartment and there shouldn't be a lot of interaction. I think what we're missing is that we need to really apply the model of everything is in constant communication and interacting. And that way, everyone is constantly self-empowered and self-responsible for the choices that they're making because it affects the whole.
What a wonderful correlation, because you're absolutely right. Within the human body, we have 100 trillion cells that make up tissues and organs and systems, and they all have to work together. There's a lot of overlap, but if you take away an aspect of that, it can never work to its optimum function. But the
Right.
key that you were talking about is working together. When the cells of the body are working together, all 100 trillion or so of them, magic happens. Health is there. When the people throughout the world are working together, magic happens. What a wonderful correlation. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bill. Always a pleasure talking to you about the thought for the day today from the Cayce readings. And thank you so much for always joining us. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's great. I love it. Thank you so much, Brent. Have a great day.
You too, Bill. Thank you.
Thanks.